Hi, host Eric here with host Tiffany, and Trenton is also in the house, although he's got his mic off at the moment. We've got Callum, Hami, INFP listener, and Milkman, aka Pretentious Thick Rib, which is my favorite of his names, I think, aka Lawrence Walker. And we're talking about authenticity. Now, the INFP listener here probably understands authenticity as being consistency with one's own feelings. This poses a challenge for the ENTP, who doesn't necessarily understand what his own feelings are very well, and so has a hard time understanding how to determine authenticity accordingly. For the ENTP, authenticity is going to be something more akin to intellectual honesty, which is a willingness to embrace reciprocal burdens and admit when oneself is wrong. To me, that rings...
How about this?
Yeah.
How about this? Authenticity is when something is what it says it is.
How does that apply to people, though? We're talking about people.
Authenticity is when something presents itself as what it is.
Well, is all subtext then inauthentic?
I mean, I'm trying to extrapolate kind of like from the idea of like an authentic item versus an inauthentic item, and the idea is that an inauthentic item is pretending to be something that it's not. So,
but I think we're talking about behaviors, not objects.
Just trying to make a more metaphysical version of that.
I like where you're going, but I think we're talking about behaviors, not objects, ultimately.
No, I know. I was trying to like take that idea and bring it over to the realm of behavior.
I'm not busting your chops. I'm just saying I don't think those two things correlate very well. I think that it's true that authentic objects present themselves as what they are, but the behavior of human beings is what typically gets called inauthentic. Like, she's so fake. You're not saying she's a fake object. You're saying she's behaving in ways that misrepresent how she's... Does anybody have
exactly. So when your intentions and your actions align.
Okay. Now, ENTPs are often accused of being manipulative, which is to say that our actions are intended to cause outcomes other than those explicitly stated. Do you think that's a fair criticism of the ENTP?
Yeah.
Okay. What makes somebody manipulative rather than, say, productive?
First of all, not in mind. Go ahead.
That was it. That's the end of my question. Versus productive. I was trying to think of the alternative to manipulative. Like, yeah, maybe some of these things are... But, and also, I don't feel as an ENTP like I'm making choices based on manipulative decisions, right? I'm sort of running after the fact, chasing my choices and making them behave differently. Say again?
I think it's a secondary after effect that's often misinterpreted as a primary intention.
Right. I agree with that entirely. Because of the sweeper and curling analogy that I've made before. For the people who do have FI higher in the stack, would you say that, or have it conscious at least, would you say that, in fact, you do view authenticity as linked to feelings primarily? Or does anybody have any comments about that? We have a new person here, Elsa. Elsa, if you'd like to be typed, we will cut this one short and type you if you want to go on mic, since I don't believe I've ever met you before. If I have typed you before, then I'm sorry, I forgot. If you're just here to listen, that's fine too. Is narcissism linked to manipulativeness? Is narcissism linked to manipulativeness? I would say probably no, because, at least not with ENTP manipulativeness, because narcissism implies a lack of concern for the well-being of others and or a willingness to do zero-sum stuff with other human beings. So ENTP manipulativeness, I think, is as Tiffany described it, it's an after effect. We act, we don't have manipulative intentions in mind, and then we sweep around our action to make it effective in meaningful ways that make it seem manipulative. Like when I made the initial video where I made fun of Chad. And then it ended up that he came on the show and we had a few good episodes together and it all worked out great, right? You might imagine that somehow I was being manipulative, that I wanted to achieve that outcome. But I did want to achieve that outcome, but after I made the video. I didn't make the video thinking I'm going to achieve this outcome. I made the video and go, oh shit, what did I do that for? Sweep, 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 sweep. That's something different than being manipulative or narcissistic. You might say the fact that I made that initial video, which was mean in the first place, was an example of narcissism, of putting myself first and not caring about other people and being... I think if it was...
You know what would it have been so bad if you had that intention?
Well, yeah. I think if you're saying, I'm going to knowingly harm another person to gain personal benefit, and that person isn't deserving of harm...
harmful.
Well, I agree. I swept around. I made it such that it wasn't harmful. And in fact, when he did come on the show...
Yeah, but what if it was your intention and you made it unharmful and it was intentional?
Well, I'm not a utilitarian, Tiffany. I think that the intent is more important than the outcome.
Fair enough.
So, Callum here says... I read somewhere, oh no, Elsa says, I read somewhere ENTPs only tend to be manipulative or narcissistic as a sort of defense mechanism. I agree. And what's often known as narcissism is actually just sort of arrogance or conceit or self-aggrandizement. It is not narcissism. Narcissism means justifying doing harm to others because it benefits you, even though they're innocent of wrongdoing. And that's ultimately narcissistic behavior in a nutshell. It means you care so much about your own things that you don't care about other people, and you genuinely don't feel empathy. I mean, or at least, narcissism bears similarities with sociopathy, because at the end of the day, they're both rooted in a lack of empathy for others.
Sociopathy?
Sociopathy? Is that how you pronounce it? I don't know. Maybe. Sociopathy?
I don't know.
Sociopathy?
I don't know. I was just throwing it out there.
Right. Well, other thoughts on this topic of authenticity. So, I know from talking to various INFJs that they often state they hate it when they see people as being inauthentic. And I think what they mean by that is when they see people as being too driven by FE. It's their main tool, and they don't necessarily like people who have it as their dominant function. And the reason is because they see them as being too concerned with perceptions of others in clumsy ways. But I don't find... I think those sort of distinctions on authenticity may be representative more of type bias than anything else. Thoughts, comments, concerns, complaints, queries? Okay. Well, let's end this video then.
I'm still thinking.
Okay, think. We should do a video that's just 10 minutes of everyone thinking.
Well, I mean, the inauthentic you were talking about with the INFJ, you said?
Well, I said INFJ will tend to think. Will tend to think ESFJs are fake.
I think they're talking about the type of people that are two-faced.
They're two-faced?
The type of people that'll feel like two different people to achieve a goal in two different situations. That kind of thing.
Elsa, I have to disagree with you there. I don't think they have stronger. I think that they've got strong unconscious. Elsa indicated that she thought that in Socionics, INFJ, stronger dimension. Yeah. With FE in the second slot, the INFJ is hyper aware of It's 4D function. I don't know what that means.
Yes.
Yeah, I agree with you there, homie. People who are too authentic usually do get screwed in the end. Unless, I think that's one advantage the ENTP might have, is that I think we're basically very transparent and very open, and in that regard, authentic. And yet, we're also down to throw down. So, we're not fragile. What's a good amount of authenticity to have? You need 40 liters, Nandi. 40 liters of authenticity minimum. So, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think you don't want to be fake, but you want to be more careful than an ENTP. You don't want to be too careful, like an ESFJ is probably a little too careful. Yeah, just you want to be authentic to. Well, I think for me, a big part of authenticity is admitting and acknowledging and coming to terms with my own shitty sounding realities. You know, like, I really want everyone to like me. I don't like the way that sounds. I don't like the way it sounds, but I have to come to terms with it, you know? And say, okay, well, that really is what I want. All right, fine. So now that you accept that, you go, okay, well, that's okay. I can be that. I can be somebody who wants everybody to like me. That's not the end of the world, you know? I could be somebody who cares a lot what other people think. That's not the end of the world. If I'm open about it, acknowledge it, then I disempower it, you know? It's not something that bothers me. For an INFJ, I think that authenticity ultimately would be best manifest in revealing how they're human too. They're fragile, that they have fears, and they're not always sure themselves. I think that's the thing about the INFJ. They don't want to reveal to other people their own human fragility. And to the extent that they can, I think they're empowered. I do think that it may be different for an INFJ in an intimate relationship. I've never been in an intimate relationship with an INFJ, so I don't know how that plays out. But I do know that in friendships, they're very protective of their internal lives and don't want them exposed to judgment for fear that they will be judged. Authenticity for the INTP, I think, comes pretty easy. I think the INTP's problems are so cerebral by nature that they don't have a lot of trouble talking about them, but they don't have a lot to say about them either. You know, I think that the INTP's challenge is to place sufficient weight, perhaps, on relationships. Okay, so Alice is sending me a link here to some Socionics thing. I clicked it. Let's see if it works. Of course, one of the problems I have is when I am recording, I have a hard time accessing stuff on the internet concurrently. It makes everything slow down a great deal. But let's see what it says. So, I mean, I know that I'm quite familiar with Socionics in general. I dispute your notion that the FI in an INFJ is actually stronger than the FE. To the extent that it is, it's stronger in a... oh, you're talking about this thing. You're talking about, what's his name, Baslow? Is that the guy's name? No, Bukalov. I see, Bukalov, yeah. Right. Yeah, I've often been very fascinated with this, and I think it's a good distinction to make. I like this model. I'm not necessarily sure I agree with it in the terms of the dimensionality stuff. And the reason is because certain functions don't align well with certain dimensionalities, right? So here it says, very strong. These kinds of information are so prevalent in us that they strongly dictate how we move and communicate in the world. Such information carries its own sense of development over time, with decisions being made as numerous, specific instances on a global scale in the greater interest of that IM element. I don't know what IM means. People can easily be recognized by the IM elements assigned to these strongest functions. Okay, so it says, the thing about it, is that it goes like this. Here's if you can see on the screen for the viewers at home, number 1 is leading, and number 6 is mobilizing. So for the INFJ, then they have 3 dimensions with their FE, which would be their creative function, and unless you've switched the P and the J, Elsa. We use the MBTI letterings here. Even though we talk about Socionics, and I'll probably start eventually switching over to the ILE, but I just haven't got it down in my head yet. Are you talking about INFP? Because, see, the INFJ, the MBTI INFJ, has 3-dimensionality in their second function, which is FE. Yeah, so, okay. So, actually, the FE has 3-dimensionality, and the FI only has 2-dimensionality, according to this chart here. So that's why, yeah, it is a really strong, FI is a really strong unconscious function for the INFJ, but they don't value it directly, explicitly. They find themselves using it all the time, just like I use TE all the time, but they're not consciously, explicitly valuing it. And no, Elsa, FI has 2. It's in the 6th slot, right? Because it goes NI, FE, TI, SE, then NE is the 5th slot. That would be suggestive. And then FI is the 6th slot. And that's mobilizing. That's 2 dimensions. Okay, well, what do you think the cognitive function stack is? What do you think the cognitive function stack is, Elsa? What do you think the order of the cognitive functions are? Okay, so that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, right? 1, 2, 3. Their role function is TI. 4. Their vulnerable function is SE. 5. Their suggestive function is NE. 6. Their mobilizing function, right? Or, I mean, you seem to believe this to be different, right? You say accepting and producing. For each block, the function of the earlier number is known as the accepting function and sets a particular need or desire. The function with the later number, 2, 4, 6, 8, is known as the producing function and has to create some action or process to satisfy the requirements of the accepting function. Okay, so that's going to be just what I indicated there, right? That depending on our type, certain kinds of information metabolism will be strong or weak, meaning we find it easy or difficult to act on that kind of information effectively. Bukolov introduced the idea of strength and weakness as being divided into 4 levels, known as dimensionality. We've talked about that, no problem. Valued or subdued. Depending on our type, certain kinds of information metabolism will be valued or subdued, not valued, meaning we appreciate those kind of information in our surroundings and reject or avoid them. By combining strong, weak, valued, and subdued dichotomies, we form the 4 blocks which the 8 functions can be separated into. So the first block is the ego block, and that contains the I mean, I just don't understand what you're saying here, Elsa. I get that you're saying I'm wrong about this, and I'm willing to admit that I'm wrong about it. I don't know it that well, but I just don't see it here. I'm seeing everything confirming what I'm saying and nothing confirming what you're saying. So, I don't know. But it's not, though. I know you said that already. And I'm saying, no, it's not, because it's the 5th function. I mean, it's the 6th. All right, so hopefully we'll get some clarification on this. It's not the 8th, Elsa. It's not the 8th function. It's the 6th. Okay, anyway, well, hopefully we'll get some clarification on this. I don't know, but we will figure out which one of us is wrong. One of us clearly is, might be me, and maybe we'll get another video clarifying this.